Hello friends, welcome to A Gentle Healing Journey. My name is Rain Francis, and on my channel I talk about how to deal with life's struggles and challenges. This video is part of a series about why we stay in emotionally abusive relationships. But of course, this could apply to any type of abusive situation. Today I'm going to talk about the fourth reason why we stay: children and pets. I would like to first say that I'm very grateful that I never experienced any kind of threat towards my pets. When my late husband was emotionally and verbally abusive, it was always directed towards me or towards other human beings. But he never said a bad word or raised a hand to our pets. Now, having said that, it still wasn't right how he treated me. And because of the way he treated me, and the fact that he wasn't working, I didn't trust him to take care of the pets. He had such deep depression, and he spent most of his days in bed or on the computer. And I felt as though if I weren't around, I don't think the dogs would ever get walked. Plus, he never wanted to leave the house anyway. So when I say that I didn't trust him with the pets, it was more about proper care and having the monetary means to take care of them. And honestly, I did stay in the marriage for many reasons, but my pets were one of those reasons for sure. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Now, I've never had a child, so as I discuss this topic of children, I'll be mostly referring to my education, to research papers, and stories that I've heard, mostly from mothers who have experienced the heart-wrenching situation of deciding to stay in an abusive relationship for the kids. But I can kind of speak a little personally about this because I do have a friend, and she did just that. And she remains with her abusive husband to this day, even though the kids are all grown and moved on to lives of their own. It's very sad, and it's really tricky and very complex. When it comes to children, when you're in an abusive relationship, it's not just you that you have to think about, it's the kids too. And when you're emotionally drained, feeling beaten down, being made to feel small, and maybe even doubting your own self-worth, how on earth can you figure out what the best course of action is when it comes to leaving your abuser and keeping your kids safe? It must be a horrible hamster wheel ride in your brain by thinking of the consequences. You know, what if you have a bitter legal battle for child custody? What if your abusive partner has threatened to harm your children or even take them away from you? The well-being of the child instantaneously becomes much more important than your own well-being. There's no guarantee in life that just because you've been abused and you leave with your children, that a judge will grant you full custody, right? I've read stories that will break your heart. One parent who tolerated years of abuse, finally escaping with their child, only to be arrested for kidnapping. Other stories of the abusive partner having the financial means to battle it out in court, knowing that you can't possibly come up with that kind of money, and then winning. And by winning, I mean they take your kids. They have custody of your kids. They won the battle. They defeated you again. Because a lot of the times, depending on the personality style of the abusive partner, it's not about the children. It's about winning. It's about punishing their victim, because their victim found the courage to leave them. Let's take a traditional marriage as an example. The woman has the kids at home, takes care of the house, takes care of all of the domestic duties. The man goes to work and he brings home the bacon. I don't think there's anything wrong at all with that kind of traditional role in a marriage. As long as both partners are happy, it's okay. If it's a happy relationship, the kids will be brought up well and they'll be responsible and respectful, and They'll be able to grow into healthy adults who make wise and healthy choices. But let's look at the dark side. What if the woman who stays at home to take care of the kids suffers abuse from her husband? She wants to get away from him, but he's in charge of the finances. She hasn't worked in years. She's been a mother, a full-time mother, who takes care of the kids in the house. How on earth could she afford legal bills to battle it out in court for custody? In an abusive situation, this kind of marriage can be a trap. And further to that, if she stays and tolerates the abuse, the kids notice. Kids are super perceptive. They notice how aggressive and they notice how dominating and controlling the abusive parent can be. And they also notice how submissive the abused parent can be. This can mess them up. This shows them what normal is. And they may go on to either be victims or abusers themselves. And there's also the thought of poverty. What if she got custody? She hasn't worked. She has no resume. How will she be able to take care of her kids so that they have everything they need? It's scary. You know, I can't even imagine how confusing it could be when a person is being abused, has to try to figure out what to do with themselves and their children. I think it's safe to say that if a person is willing to abuse their spouse, then they're likely willing to abuse their children. This thought must always be in the forefront of a parent's mind, and I'm sure that it makes it much more difficult to decide to leave the abusive marriage or the abusive relationship. Maybe you think that by staying, you're protecting your child, that by leaving, it'll make life worse for your child. Endure the abuse. Don't create chaos. Keep the child safe, right? Wrong. Because as I mentioned, children see everything. They sense tension and they feel fear, and this creates trauma in them. If, to keep your child safe from seeing or sensing the abuse, you have to leave, it's not going to destroy them. It's going to save them, and you at the same time. We've all heard that children need both parents to grow up without issues or without struggles. But if one parent is abusive, this is creating issues and struggles. It's harmful and has a negative impact on the child. But of course, this is all theory. I'm sure that deep down, the parent who is struggling with being abused, they know that their kids see it all and feel it all. But when you're trapped, it's a helpless feeling. Tolerating it for the sake of the kids seems to be the only solution that you can think of. There's also the terrifying thought of what might happen. And by that I mean the abusive partner has threatened to harm the children if the victim leaves. This is punishment. And it's like the kids are commodities in this. I don't know how any parent makes a decision based on a threat of harming or killing their children. I just don't know how they do it. It's a real fear. I mentioned before that I have a friend who stayed in a very long-term marriage that was abusive. She stayed because of her kids. Her husband was emotionally and verbally abusive to her, and she stayed in the marriage. In fact, she's still in the marriage 30 plus years. For her, it was all about making sure that her kids had everything that they needed. She didn't think that she could provide for them as well as her husband could together. So she made the decision a long time ago that she would endure his abuse for the sake of her children's happiness. Her children have grown up to be the most beautiful and responsible and mature adults. And the thing is, she's still in the marriage, even though they're grown up and have lives of their own. In this case, we discussed it, and her words were, "There's no point in me leaving him now. I have a lifestyle that I like. I just have to avoid him at all costs, and he's older than me, so he's probably going to die soon." This might surprise some people to hear, but it didn't surprise me. This is the way victims of abuse think. These are the conclusions that we make. We weigh the odds. We decide how much we can tolerate. And this is probably very common, more common than we realize. I just feel sad that she's still in this relationship. She feels like it's too late for her to start over again. It's really sad. Okay, how about we talk about pets? This is a hard subject, friends. Pets are very often overlooked when you read literature about how to leave an abusive relationship. They are also overlooked at domestic abuse shelters. Back in 2019, I considered walking away from my lease. The rental was under my name and he refused to move out. I felt trapped and I visited a woman's shelter. I noticed most of the women had kids with them. I didn't notice any pets. So I asked, may I bring my 3 dogs with me? No, flat out, no. But the lady said, well, we can find foster homes for them. But this wasn't an option for me. As someone who spent her life with at least 1 dog, since I can remember, I really have observed canine behavior. They feel what we feel. I've seen one of my dogs cry. That might surprise you, but it's true. I was walking her one day, and there was a group of people. This was a really long time ago, and they had 2 dogs off leash. So I crossed to the other side of the road to avoid them. But one of their dogs ran up to mine across the street, and my dog growled. She felt threatened, so she showed the other dog that it needed to back off. Well, the owner of the dog that came up to us, oh my God, he yelled at me, he yelled at her, he grabbed and yanked his dog and walked away. My little dog had her tail between her legs and she had watery eyes. She had tears in her eyes. She'd come from a very abusive situation and she was terrified. I picked her up and I carried her all the way home. I just wanted to share that story because it demonstrates that our pets have strong emotions. They have fear, they have joy, and they have solid bonds to us, to their people. Being the major caregiver to all of the pets during my marriage, I knew that my dogs especially would suffer if I left them. They would suffer emotionally, and likely their quality of life would suffer from, let's say, a slight bit of neglect. So I could never leave them. All of my dogs have always come from shelters, and they were in those shelters because they were seized from unhealthy situations. They all suffer trauma, and to separate them all and place them all in different foster homes or leave them behind, I couldn't do it. I have a dear friend who is a foster mother, and she's the best. I know how the kids are traumatized from being away from home, even if it was a dysfunctional home, just from speaking to her. And I wouldn't do that to my pets. So I just decided to tolerate the abuse when it happened and not have to leave my pets behind. Some people will stay in abusive situations for fear of their pet's safety. As I mentioned, people have very strong emotional connections to their pets and the pets to them. Abusers know how deep that emotional connection is, and they use it. Threatening to harm or kill a pet, actually hurting them, withholding food or vet care or walks or basic hygiene like not emptying the cat litter or not brushing the dogs. They use the pets to manipulate, control, and punish their victim. This is such a hard topic for me to discuss because I'm an emotional gal, and the idea of anyone purposely harming an animal just to control someone else or to retaliate or punish them, it's insidious to me and it breaks my heart. I'm super uncomfortable with this topic, but it needs to be talked about. The idea that a victim of abuse will stay and tolerate more abuse because they think that their presence is the only thing keeping their pet safe and alive, that's heartbreaking. If a victim finally makes the awful choice to leave and not bring their pet with them, they may end up going back anyway because their abuser tells them what might happen to their pet if they don't come home. Forcing a person who's already emotionally, mentally, and maybe even physically drained and beaten down, forcing them to make that unthinkable choice between saving themselves from abuse and the well-being of their pets. This is a great example of coercive control. It's not by accident. It's a deliberate tactic used by an abuser to instill fear and demand compliance, control. Like children, the pets become the pawn in the cycle of abuse. This must be so tormenting to the victim, knowing that if they leave, their beloved pets are vulnerable to the brunt of their abusive partner's behavior. It's a helpless feeling. It's like psychological torture. Pet owners will agree, pets aren't just animals, they're family members. They're loved and cherished and appreciated. We never want them to suffer, ever. I have a real-life example of an abuser tormenting a victim of abuse by taking her pet away from her. Many of you know that I have several dogs, including a Rottweiler. Her name is Raven. Raven came to me in 2024. She was brought to a shelter in January of 2024. She was surrendered by her owner. What I was told from the shelter was that there was a couple, common law married couple. It was an abusive relationship where the husband was emotionally abusive to the wife. They had Raven for about 5 years. And as a way to punish his wife for ending the relationship, the abusive husband decided to surrender Raven to a shelter. He was Raven's official owner, but they were both Raven's fur parents, you know. The girls at the shelter told me that the wife would come daily to visit Raven, but she couldn't adopt her because she was staying at a shelter. Plus, she was self-aware enough to realize that she didn't have the means to take care of her. At one point, the shelter's employees had to ask the woman to stop coming back because Raven started to get into a huge depression, knowing that she wasn't going to be leaving the shelter with her fur mom. Raven's owner, the abusive partner, didn't even care about his own dog. He just wanted to hurt his wife where he knew it would cut her deeply. Getting rid of the dog she loved without giving her a chance to be able to adopt her when she got back on her feet, just awful. I mean, I feel grateful that Raven came to me 6 months after that, and she will never feel that way again, abandoned and depressed. She has a forever home here. But this was an example of an abusive partner using Raven as a tool to punish his victim because she left him. Isn't that awful? That's just awful. And just a note on the lack of pet-friendly shelters for domestic abuse victims. When a person who is being abused finally has the guts to leave and they can't bring their pets with them, it's devastating. Let's just imagine that there isn't any kind of threat against the pet. If the abuse victim leaves, let's imagine that the abuser actually treats them well and will take good care of them, despite the victim wanting to end the relationship. This is a crucial moment for someone who has made the courageous decision to leave an abuser. Pets are an important source of emotional healing for many victims, both during and after the relationship. Pets offer unconditional love, stability, and non-judgmental companionship. And this can lessen the feeling of isolation in an abusive relationship. When you care for your pets, it restores your sense of purpose. It creates responsibility. And it helps you to build your confidence when you know that you're doing a great job taking care of your pets. And on a chemical level, the bond that we have with our pets, it triggers the release of oxytocin, and that's the neurochemical that cultivates trust, calm, and connection. Overall, having our pets with us during and after abusive situations helps in trauma recovery, especially in domestic abuse shelters, because that's likely where the abuse victim will begin to rebuild their lives. I have a dream one day to open a shelter for men and women who are trying to escape abusive situations. And of course, it would be absolutely pet friendly. It's a dream, maybe one day. So my friends, that's the fourth reason why we stay in these abusive relationships, for our children and our pets. I think the most evil thing that an abuser can do is to use children and pets as a controlling tactic to keep their victims in line. The bond between a person and their child, or a person and their pet, is so strong and loving. For an abusive partner to use that against their victim, I can't say anything more about that. In my next video in this series that will be coming out next week, I will discuss cultural, social, and religious pressure as a reason why we stay in intimate partner relationships that are abusive. Until then, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Please be well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.